There are moments in life that arrive quietly, unnoticed at first, the kind that slip into the edges of a man's world like a draft through an open window. They don't roar, they don't announce themselves, they simply exist, a faint ripple on the surface of routine. And long before a man realizes it, that ripple becomes the only thing he can see. For Aaron Blake, that moment began with a scent. It was nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, just a faint trace of perfume in the hallway, floral, unfamiliar, drifting like a whisper across the warm air of a home he thought he understood. He paused at the bottom of the stairs that night, carrying his laptop bag, thinking maybe the scent belonged to a neighbor who had visited earlier, or maybe it was a new detergent his wife had bought. He inhaled again. No, not detergent, not a neighbor. This scent didn't belong to his wife. And yet it lingered stubbornly, as if daring him to question it. He shook it off and headed to the bedroom, but the house refused to let him ignore it. And later that week, the first true crack appeared, small, nearly invisible. A picture frame on the bedside table, one he straightened almost every morning without thinking, suddenly leaned again. Aaron adjusted it, like always, the next morning. It was crooked again. And by then, the ripple in his mind had grown stronger, restless, reaching places a man doesn't go unless something deep inside is unsettled. He started paying attention without intending to, a mug left in a place he never uses. A throw blanket folded in a style he doesn't fold, a subtle, almost imperceptible warmth on Lila's side of the bed long after she'd supposedly left for work. None of it was evidence, just impressions, faint fingerprints on the walls of his intuition, but the house was speaking, and Aaron, without admitting it, had begun to listen. It was a Tuesday night when he first felt it, the unmistakable sensation that someone had walked past the open bedroom door while he faced the closet. He spun around instinctively, nothing, no movement, no footsteps. Just the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft, steady glow of the reading lamp. He checked the hallway, empty, checked downstairs, dark and quiet. Still, something was wrong. A shift in the air, the kind that makes the skin on a man's neck rise with a primal message he can't explain. He told himself he was tired. He told himself stress was playing tricks on him. But the night refused to settle. Hours later, he awoke to a sound upstairs, soft, rhythmic, too deliberate to mistake for the settling of wood or the wind brushing against the siding. A hushed rustling, the whisper of fabric, footsteps that stopped the moment he held his breath to listen. Aaron sat up in bed, heart pounding. Lila, he whispered into the dark, no answer. His eyes drifted to her side of the bed, empty. She had said she wasn't sleeping well and was taking late-night baths to relax. He believed her. And sapather mensalarek. Why wouldn't he? She was his wife, his partner, the woman who held his hand through funerals, birthdays, job losses, and every storm between. But a man can only silence his instincts for so long before they find a way to rise. Aaron stepped into the hallway. Again, nothing. Only silence, thick, waiting, watching. He returned to bed and lay awake until dawn, certain of only one thing. The house he had built with love no longer felt like home. Something had entered it, something unseen, something he didn't recognize, and it was growing bolder. The next morning, Lila greeted him in the kitchen with her usual warm smile, wearing the robe he'd bought her for their anniversary, humming softly as she stirred her coffee. He studied her face, the soft blue eyes, the gentle sweep of her hair, the tender way she said his name. She was flawless in her innocence, or perhaps flawless at performing innocence. Aaron, you look tired, she said, touching his cheek. He nodded, unable to explain what he felt. The truth would make him sound irrational, paranoid. He forced a smile. Rough night. She kissed him on the forehead and told him to try meditation. That always helped, she said. He didn't correct her. He didn't mention the footsteps or the scent or the shifting objects. Some truths sound foolish before they become undeniable. He simply watched her move around the kitchen, graceful, at ease, untouched by the shadows creeping through his thoughts. But behind her smile, behind her soft voice, he saw something he had never looked for. Distance, a thin layer of emotional glass between them. A small, invisible separation that had no reason to exist. Unless it hid something, the ripple grew larger. The turning point came on a Wednesday, a night with nothing special attached to it. No event, no argument, no warning. Aaron had come home an hour earlier than usual because a meeting was canceled. He opened the front door quietly, ready to surprise Lila, but before he could step inside fully, he heard it. A faint, breathy laugh, not hers, a creak on the stairs, the unmistakable thud of hurried footsteps. Aaron froze. keys still in hand. For a long moment, he didn't breathe fast. For a long moment, he didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't blink. His entire body locked into a single terrible awareness. Someone was in his home right now with her. But then Cat Lila appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing yoga leggings and a loose top, looking perfectly calm, perfectly alone. "Oh, you're home early," she said brightly, brushing hair from her face. "You scared me." Aaron looked past her toward the hallway. Silence, no evidence, no intruder, no movement. No movement. Just a woman smiling down at her husband with the ease of someone who had nothing to hide. Or someone who had become very, very good at hiding. He forced himself to smile back. But something in him had shifted permanently, as subtly and irreversibly as a misaligned hinge. It wasn't until 3 days later, when a storm rolled through and power flickered out for a single second, that something in Aaron snapped. He had been sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone when the electricity blinked. The baby monitor on the nightstand beeped, rebooted, and its small screen lit up automatically, switching to the live feed from the guest room upstairs. Aaron never used the guest room. He hadn't stepped inside it in months. Yet the moment the camera connected, he froze on the screen, two silhouettes close, much too close. A woman, unmistakably Lila, and a man tall, muscular, confident, his face obscured, but his presence unmistakably intimate. They stood inches apart, whispering, touching, and then the man leaned in and Lila didn't pull away. Aaron didn't blink, couldn't. The storm roared outside, rain slapping against the windows, thunder rolling across the sky, but all Aaron heard was the quiet betrayal unfolding in grainy, undeniable clarity. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was fearless, bold enough to bring him into their home. Into the rooms they decorated together, into the air they breathed, into the life Aaron thought was real. His chest grew tight, but not with rage, with clarity. For the first time, he understood why the house felt foreign, why the shadows felt crowded, why the air felt wrong. This wasn't just a home anymore, it was a stage, a set, a carefully curated illusion where he played the part of devoted husband, while another man played the role he didn't know he'd been replaced in. Aaron set the baby monitor down with eerie calm. He didn't confront her, he didn't call anyone, he didn't scream or break or beg. He simply sat there in the dim light of the flickering lamp, breathing slowly as the pieces slid into place with cold precision. The betrayal wasn't new, it had roots, history, practice. This was just the first time the house allowed him to see it. And as he stared at the monitor, watching the silhouettes disappear into darkness, Aaron Blake made a silent promise. He would not confront her tonight. He would not shout or demand or explode. He would wait, watch, learn, because betrayal that bold required a revenge just as deliberate. The house had two faces now, and one of them belonged to him. Betrayal has a strange way of sharpening a man's senses. In the days after Aaron watched the footage, everything in his home took on a new texture. The sound of footsteps, the flicker of a hallway light, even the familiar aroma of Lila's coffee in the morning. Nothing felt honest anymore. Nothing felt untouched by the truth he had witnessed. Yet Aaron moved through the house with the same quiet routine he'd kept for years. He kissed Lila on the cheek before work. He asked about her day. He laughed at her jokes. He played the part she expected him to play because now he wasn't a husband, he was an observer. And he was studying a liar. The first question he needed answered was simple. Who was the man in the footage? Lila had introduced Aaron to most of her coworkers at one point or another, holiday parties, work dinners, casual lunches, but no face from her office matched the silhouette on the baby monitor, not the posture, not the build, not the swagger. So he went backwards, starting with the only clue he had, the way Lila once described a certain colleague, annoying. Shaka. She said it with an irritated laugh during dinner one evening months ago, a quick comment, a passing complaint. Aaron never thought to ask for details. Why would he? Back then, Lila still felt like a safe place. Now those words echoed with new weight, annoying, persistent, always finding ways to help her with projects. Aaron remembered vaguely. A man named Chase Dalton, a coworker she claimed was immature, pushy, and too proud of his gym routine. She said he flirted with everyone and that she found him exhausting to be around. But the memory chilled him now because that same annoyance could easily mask attraction or guilt. Aaron needed to be sure. He opened Lila's laptop one morning while she showered, something he had never done in their entire marriage. His heart thundered, not with fear, but with a cold, methodical determination. He knew her passcode, she didn't hide it. Because she never imagined he'd have a reason to look. Inside her email, he found nothing at first. No romantic exchanges, no incriminating messages. But when he checked her trash folder, then her archive, then her drafts, pieces of something darker appeared, message fragments, scheduling hints, flirtatious remarks buried between work reports, and a recurring name, Chase. His stomach tightened. This wasn't an office crush. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a pattern, a practice. A long-term deceit unfolding behind every smile she had offered him. Aaron didn't confront her. He didn't slam a door. He didn't raise a voice. Infidelity alone wasn't enough to explain everything he'd seen. The secrecy, the texts she hid, the financial statements she suddenly guarded. The conversations she took outside where she believed he couldn't hear. The puzzle was larger, far more deliberate. So he kept pretending. Every morning, he poured her coffee the way she liked, with 1 teaspoon of sugar and a hint of vanilla cream. She smiled warmly, unaware that the man standing across from her was no longer blinded by love. He watched her closely now, the way her eyes darted at the sound of a notification, the way she kept her phone screen tilted away from him, the way she lingered near the back door waiting for fresh air before stepping outside to whisper into her phone. She thought she was being subtle. She wasn't, but the real darkness waited beneath the surface. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. A quiet day, warm sunlight spilling across the backyard, the hum of a lawnmower in the distance. Karak and Sir Howard and Sarah Maction. Lila thought Aaron was upstairs working. She believed she had a moment to herself. Kekinasam Kame. She stepped onto the patio, phone in hand, and Aaron followed silently to the landing above, close enough to hear but far enough to remain unseen. At first, her tone was soft and flirtatious, the kind of sweetness she hadn't offered Aaron in months. Then it shifted, sharp, irritated, calculating. I told you, he won't suspect anything, she whispered. He's too trusting, too predictable. A pause, a low male answered, muffled by the speaker. Lila's manned and had predictable. A pause, a low male voice answered, muffled by the speaker. Then Lila's voice again, colder. And I'm not worried about him finding out. I'm worried about him getting in the way. We need him out before any of this can move forward. Aaron's breath caught, her voice lowered. No, not like that. I just mean gone, out of the picture. Once everything is settled, we'll move forward. Another pause, another whisper. Yes, I'll handle it. Aaron stood frozen at the top of the stairs. Gone? Out of the way, those words lodged themselves deep in his chest, heavier than betrayal, heavier than infidelity. This wasn't about a failing marriage. This wasn't about desire. This wasn't about a man chasing a thrill. This was about erasing him, reliving him, destroying him. The betrayal had moved beyond the realm of heartbreak. It had become existential, a threat to his life, his future, his existence. Aaron stepped back from the landing, silently, heart thundering, mind sharpening into a new kind of clarity. Now he understood. This wasn't a story about a cheating wife. It was the story of a woman who had grown so comfortable in deception that she had forgotten the quiet, patient nature of the man she was betraying. A man who saw more than he let on, a man who spoke little but listened deeply, a man who had just crossed the threshold between pain and purpose. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Aaron felt something he hadn't felt in weeks, control. He walked back into the room and closed the door behind him gently. The real investigation had just begun. There are places in a home that no one notices anymore. The shadows behind bookshelves, the sliver of space beneath stair treads, the forgotten gap between drywall and cabinets. Aaron noticed them all. For weeks, he had walked through his house with the quiet calculation of a surgeon preparing an incision. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt like a dormant creature, ribs rising and falling under its wooden frame, waiting to be awakened. He had always believed walls listened. He just never expected them to speak back. Hated Torai K. He started with the bedroom, the same room where the first truth had shattered him. Under the warm glow of the bedside lamp, Aaron moved with surgical patience. He lifted the panel under the nightstand, exposing a plywood cavity no one would think twice about. He slid the first microcamera into it, positioning the lens through a hole no bigger than a screw head. Its eye gleamed back at him, tiny, unblinking, loyal. There was no satisfaction in the act, no thrill, only necessity. While others sought closure and confrontation, Aaron sought power in silence. Because silence allowed something confrontation never could, evidence that spoke louder than denial. Lila had taught him that every night after she fell asleep, even in her fake warmth, even under the false weight of her arm draped across him, Aaron slipped out of bed like a shadow shedding its host. He walked the halls barefoot, familiar now with where the floor creaked and where it didn't. In the closet, behind his row of button-downs, sat 3 small boxes stacked like ordinary storage containers. Inside them, motion sensors, digital audio recorders, micro SD cards, spare batteries, and a foldable oscilloscope he hadn't touched since college. He bought none of it recently. That was the genius of it. Tech from years past, still functional, easily hidden, untraceable, nothing newer that came with cloud syncing or tracking metadata, nothing the police or a curious technician could later label suspicious purchases. Dried purchases. The house would keep the secrets, not the internet. The second camera went behind a vent cover in the hallway. Not facing the hallway, but facing the door to his home office, he had started noticing things missing there first. A legal document here, a financial folder there, a USB drive suddenly misplaced. At first, he blamed fatigue. Then he blamed himself, then he stopped blaming and started watching. The hallway vent was perfect. Lila dusted everywhere, except the vents. She'd always hated vents. Dust traps, she called them. Perfect hiding places, Aaron thought. The kitchen was next, not because it was strategically important, but because it hurt him the most. The kitchen had been their space, late-night pancakes, burnt garlic, bread, and her dancing badly to music from the Utiozako Jers, his pretending not to notice. It was where life had felt real. Now, it was where she had whispered to the man from the footage, laughing as if she hadn't burned Aaron's heart on the same stovetop years ago. So he crawled under that very counter, drill in hand, removing just enough wood to insert a sound sensor. His shoulders strained, his breath echoed in the hollow, sweat dripped into sawdust that clung to his arms. It didn't matter. What mattered was the angle of the audio pickup, the clean path for sound waves, the absence of electrical interference. He checked the connection twice, then a third time, because failure was not an option. Not now. Not after hearing her whisper move him out of the way within 48 hours. The house became something new. A silent witness, a memory machine, a creature with eyes in its bones and ears under its skin. Cameras watched the living room, the hallway, and the backyard. Audio devices hid under sinks, behind outlet plates, inside decorative bowls. Sensors tracked footsteps, door openings, even shifts of weight on the floorboards. And all of it fed into one central core. A drive embedded inside the wall behind a breaker panel, a place even an electrician wouldn't casually open. Aaron worked on it in the dark, by flashlight, while Lila slept upstairs. It was strangely poetic. He had once built this home for their future, Now he was reconstructing it for her downfall. It took only days for patterns to emerge. Lila was predictable, not in her love, but in her lies. She was affectionate in the mornings, almost excessively so. A touch on the shoulder, a kiss on the cheek, a lingering smile, that meant guilt. By lunch, she grew cold, short replies, vague explanations, sudden errands. That meant preparation. By evening, she was bright again, as if rehearsing joy. That meant deception. Aaron watched these cycles on screen, his face lit by the dull glow of monitors hidden in the garage. He didn't feel heartache anymore, just clarity. Clarity was colder, sharper, cleaner than pain. The first real piece of evidence came on a Tuesday night. Aaron had been reviewing footage when he saw her enter the home office. She moved differently, slower, cautious, like someone who didn't want to leave fingerprints on her own crime. She opened his desk drawer, she took a photo of his social security card, his birth certificate, his banking information, and then she whispered to her phone, "Tell him I got it." Aaron paused the recording. A strange calm washed over him. Not anger, not shock, a chilling acknowledgement that the betrayal was not impulsive, not emotional, not a moment of weakness. This was logistics, this was engineering, this was a strategy. She wasn't cheating on him. She was building a life without him, using his identity as the foundation. It wasn't long before the lover appeared. Not physically, he was too cautious for that, but his voice filled the kitchen one afternoon while Aaron was reviewing audio logs. Through the recorder hidden under the counter, Aaron heard Lila giggle. "You should have seen him," she whispered. "He has no idea," the man replied, voice low, self-assured. "Eek, good. Keep it that way." Once the transfer goes through, we move fast. I don't want him interfering. Lila hesitated, not long, just a beat. Yeah, but the hesitation said more than her words. He won't, she said. He trusts me. In the audio, the man chuckled. Aaron felt something fracture inside him. Not like a crack, more like a tilt in the foundation of a life he had built. Yeah, he rewound the audio, played it again and again, because every repetition turned betrayal into motivation. By the second week, the devices captured their routines with terrifying clarity, their secret phone calls, their financial plotting, their discussions of timelines and legal advantages, their arguments about whether Aaron was useful for a bit longer or already in the way. Every word tightened the noose, not around Aaron, around them. The house stored it all. Hours upon hours of their own voices weaving the rope of their downfall. Aaron didn't need to guess anymore. He didn't need to doubt. He didn't need to ask her why she came home late or why her perfume didn't smell like her. The evidence lived in every wire he had placed, and the house remembered. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Late one night after Lila had fallen asleep, Aaron checked a camera feed from the garage entrance, the one facing the laundry room wall. Something had caught the motion sensor earlier. He played it back. Lila entered with a manila envelope. She removed documents and laid them on the dryer, photographed each page with careful precision, bank statements, property deeds, insurance forms. Okay. Then she made a call. Yeah, I have the asset list. Everything under his name. Yes, including the retirement account. Aaron sat very still. He had known she was planning something, but not this scale, not this confidence, not this coldness. Then she spoke again, and her next sentence dropped into Aaron's stomach like a stone. Ken, don't worry, once things get handled, he won't contest anything. Shendled. The word ricocheted inside Aaron's skull. Handled did not mean divorce. Handled did not mean separation. Handled meant removal, elimination, disposal, a clean exit. Ken, Lila wasn't trying to survive without Aaron. She was planning a life after Aaron, a life where he no longer existed. Aaron converted the recordings into a timeline, color-coded, cross-referenced, condensed into a blueprint of betrayal. Green tags for financial manipulation, red tags for discussions of harming him, blue tags for meetings with the lover, and yellow tags for stolen documents, black tags for conversations that hinted at something worse, something lethal. And the screen looked like a battlefield, and Aaron was no longer a victim navigating the ruins. Yeah, he was the architect studying a fortress from the inside. One evening, while reviewing a newly triggered clip, Aaron caught something chilling. Lila stood at the kitchen counter, whispering into her phone again. Her voice was soft, too soft for normal conversation. The audio pickup barely caught it. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's still sleeping next to me like nothing's wrong. It's actually kind of pathetic. Aaron froze. She laughed. Yeah, when the time comes, he won't even see it coming. That's the beauty of it. She paused. No, I told you, it has to look natural, an accident, something clean, accident, clean. Aaron stared at the waveform on screen. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. He replayed it, slower than slower. She wasn't cheating on him, she wasn't leaving him, she was plotting his disappearance. And the house she lived in, the house he had paid for, the house he had built for them, was recording her planning his death. Aaron sat in the dark garage, the hum of the monitors surrounding him like an orchestra of quiet tension. He felt a transformation inside him, not sudden, not explosive, but inevitable. Pain became clarity, clarity became resolve. Resolve became purpose. He now understood something profound. You cannot fight a monster by yelling at it. You defeat a monster by letting it believe you are already dead inside. The house had given him more than evidence. It had given him insight, timing, strategy, patterns, behaviors. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was planning, and the planning felt cleaner than revenge, more righteous, more exact. Lila wasn't fighting a broken man. She was facing someone she didn't know existed. A man who had already accepted the death she wanted for him and had risen from it with purpose. When Aaron finally left the garage that night, the house felt different, not haunted, not cold, alert, rakana, as if every wire and beam and hidden sensor was holding its breath, waiting for Aaron's next move, waiting for permission to unveil everything it had witnessed, because the house remembered now. It remembered every lie, every whisper. Every stolen document, every plan to remove him, and soon, very soon, it would testify. Betrayal has a strange rhythm. At first it whispers, then it lingers in corners, and finally it screams in the spaces you once called home. Aaron had felt it before. He had felt it in the shadows of the bedroom, in the footage that burned his soul, in the whispers that spoke of removal and erasure. But nothing prepared him for the evolution of Lila, the transformation. From a cheating wife to a predator in her own house. She moved through their home with a cold confidence now, a predator testing the patience of the prey she thought was blind. And yet, Aaron was no longer prey. He was a sentinel, silent, patient, and calculating. It began subtly. Lila misplaced things, keys, wallets, important documents, but the misplacements were never random. They always occurred when Aaron needed them most. A stack of bills he had to mail vanished. His work files disappeared from the office desk. Sometimes she would leave a glass of water in his path, or a light switched on in a room he intended to avoid. Each act carried a subtle psychological sting, a push towards self-doubt, a whisper of instability. Aaron noticed them all. He never complained, he never confronted. Instead, he cataloged each misplaced item, each fabricated argument, each staged moment of insanity on her part was noted, time-stamped, and quietly logged. The house, already an unblinking witness, absorbed her every act. Lila grew bolder by the week. She began staging arguments in public spaces, at grocery stores, at restaurants, even at a neighbor's gathering. Why are you so forgetful, Aaron? You left your wallet again? Honestly, I'm starting to worry about your memory, she would say, voice dripping faux concern. Aaron remained calm, unflinching. Every time she tried to provoke him, he smiled lightly, nodded, and continued, as if her words were nothing more than wind against a window. To Lila, this calmness was weakness. She misread the quiet intensity in his gaze. She mistook observation for submission. Behind her back, Aaron's mind sharpened. Every whisper, every misstep, every tiny sabotage was a thread he would weave into a tapestry of their own undoing. As Lila's psychological games grew predictable, her moves began to take on a dangerous edge. It started with subtle sabotage. The ladder in the garage, Aaron had leaned on it 1,000 times while fixing lights, was slightly loosened at the screws. He noticed it during routine inspections but said nothing. The gas stove, often left on low during cooking, had a burner knob slightly off alignment. A careful observer might have noticed, a careless one might have ignored it. She was escalating and she believed he remained oblivious, but Aaron noticed he cataloged each risk meticulously. Each potential harm became evidence. Each accident that could have been fatal was a note in the ledger of her betrayal. The home, their shared fortress, now mirrored the careful calculation of a predator. Except Aaron was the one orchestrating from the shadows. It was in the way she whispered to Chase in the kitchen, one evening, that Aaron realized she was no longer just hiding her affair. He's too trusting. He still doesn't see anything. By the time he does, it will be too late. Aaron's chest tightened. This wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't even about financial gain. It was about control. Erasure. Every staged argument, every misplaced item, every attempt to make him doubt his mind, every minor sabotage was a rehearsal. She was preparing for a final act, and she didn't know he had been rehearsing too. Aaron began to understand her rhythm: morning, feigned warmth, exaggerated affection, small smiles that concealed a sharpened blade. Afternoon, coldness, dismissive tones, careless provocations designed to make him doubt himself. Evenings had a strange rhythm in their home now. Quiet calls behind half-closed doors, subtle choices that never felt accidental, tiny actions that seemed to shift the atmosphere by inches. Aaron noticed how Lila would voice her concerns just loud enough for neighbors to overhear, in how she would misplace things in places he rarely touched, creating small puzzles no one admitted to setting. How she paused near the stove or hallway during phone calls, as if choosing every word with calculated care. Nothing she did was random. Every move carried two meanings, one for him, one for whoever might be watching or listening. Aaron didn't react. He observed, he kept a quiet record, the contradictions, the whispers, the small strategic behaviors. The moments that didn't add up, each detail became part of a larger picture he was determined to understand. Lila's biggest mistake was assuming he wasn't paying attention. She mistook calm for complacency, patience for indifference. But Aaron's calm was intentional, it was careful, it was focused. To the outside world, he looked like the steady partner, the one trying to hold things together, the one listening, the one giving space. Inside, he was analyzing patterns, looking for clarity, searching for the truth beneath the tension in their home. The more unpredictable Lila became, the more her choices revealed And the more Aaron observed, the more he saw how their house had quietly become part of the mystery. Small devices that tracked unusual noises, smart home logs that captured odd movements, timestamps that formed patterns on their own. He wasn't plotting revenge, he wasn't preparing for confrontation. He was preparing for understanding, for the moment when everything would finally make sense. Every creak of the floorboard, every sigh, every hushed phone call, stored. Every risk she took, every item she manipulated, every minor accident, documented. The house remembered. The house waited. The house became the silent architect of their destruction. Aaron walked the halls with deliberate slowness, inspecting his cameras, reviewing footage, listening to audio feeds. Each night he compiled a comprehensive archive, timestamps, evidence of gaslighting, financial manipulation, adultery, intent to harm, and conspiracy. By the end of the second week, he had a blueprint, a map, a dossier, a story of her betrayal told in her own voice, her own movements, her own words. Lila's physical sabotage escalated in subtle but dangerous ways. One evening, she deliberately left a small container of cleaning chemicals on the counter next to Aaron's coffee mug. She watched from the doorway as he reached for it, a small smirk playing across her lips. Aaron froze mid-step, not from fear but from observation. He noted the placement, noted her timing, noted the shadow of a twisted satisfaction in her eyes. Another time, she accidentally loosened the gas cap on his car after he parked in the driveway. She whispered into her phone, presumably to Chase, about how he trusts me too much. Each incident was a test. Each incident was meant to provoke panic. Each incident was meant to make him feel unsafe, unbalanced, and cornered. But Aaron remained composed. The calmness unnerved her. She began to show cracks, the first real cracks in her carefully maintained mask. Lila, convinced she was invisible in her schemes, grew bolder in her emotional manipulations. She began staging arguments designed to make Aaron appear unhinged to friends and colleagues. Misplaced items, fabricated confrontations, subtle lies. She painted a portrait of instability. "You're always losing things," she would say, eyes wide with fake concern. "Maybe you need a checkup, Aaron. You're forgetful lately. Not like yourself yet. Every time." Aaron responded with calm, a faint smile, a quiet acknowledgement. She began to grow hostile, throwing verbal jabs, testing his patience, trying to provoke an outburst. Aaron watched silently. Each reaction, or lack thereof, was logged. Each word, each inflection, each manipulated moment added to the dossier of her own destruction. By the third week, Aaron had everything he needed. Financial documents showing transfers and unauthorized withdrawals. Audio evidence of her plotting with Chase, video of sabotage, lies, and staged moments, records of conversations where she spoke about removing him from the picture. The house had become both witness and vault. Every corner, every wall, every hidden device contributed to the growing mountain of evidence. Aaron began assembling the final strategy, not as a reaction but as a deliberate act of precision he would not confront. He would not plead, he would allow her own actions to collapse under their own weight. She believed she was winning, she believed he was blind, she believed her mask was flawless, she was wrong. On a quiet Thursday night, Aaron walked through the house. He moved slowly, deliberately. The cameras followed. The motion sensors logged, the audio devices recorded. He touched each wall lightly, each hidden device, each silent observer. The house had remembered everything, and it had waited for this moment. Aaron paused in the hallway outside Lila's bedroom. She was on the phone, whispering plans that would have terrified him weeks ago. Now they only confirmed what he already knew. Her mask had begun to crack. Her calm confidence was brittle. Her dominance, carefully constructed, had left tiny fractures. And Aaron, patient, deliberate, and precise, had begun to exploit every single one. The storm was coming. And for the first time in months, Aaron allowed himself a faint smile. Because the game was no longer about survival, it was about retribution, and Lila had unknowingly built the stage for her own downfall. The night the house woke up was not a night of lightning or storm. There were no screams, no explosions. Yet, within the walls and corridors of their home, a subtle, insidious pulse began to vibrate, a rhythm that Lila would come to know as terror incarnate. Aaron had waited patiently, silently, observing, recording, and planning. For weeks he had endured her manipulations, her gaslighting, her subtle attempts to drive him into a panic. Now the time had come to let the house speak for him. It began with the smallest disruptions, A phone notification flashed across Lila's screen. A private video, apparently sent to her own email account, played a conversation she had with Chase just hours ago. In it, her words were unchanged, but the context had been rearranged. The tone of betrayal, the nuance of her plotting, appeared sharper, darker, almost criminal. She gasped, her hand trembling over the phone. The same evening, a fake bank alert appeared on a laptop. A fake bank alert appeared on her laptop. Unauthorized transactions detected. Immediate verification required. Panic gripped her chest. Chase's confident, casual demeanor faltered. Lila's carefully cultivated composure began to crack. Aaron watched silently from the control room he had built into the utility closet. Monitors displayed every corner of the house. Cameras, microphones, and hidden devices captured the minutiae of her every reaction. He allowed himself a quiet satisfaction, a calm smile, as he observed the seeds of paranoia sprouting in her mind. By now, Lila believed she had mastered every corner of the house. She had installed alarms for security, sensors for privacy, and cameras she thought monitored only her husband's eccentricities. But Aaron had been watching, learning, adapting. Every control panel, every connected device, every hidden camera he had installed was now a weapon. Lights flickered in rooms where she swore no switch had been touched. Door locks clicked and unclicked when she approached them, subtle but deliberate. The subtle hum of the HVAC system occasionally morphed into low whispers, carried by speakers hidden in vents, echoing fragments of arguments she had spoken aloud days before. She laughed nervously at first. Must be a glitch, she whispered, but the house had no glitches. The house had been waiting. The digital onslaught continued. Their text messages, conversations she had meticulously deleted, or so she thought, began to vanish from her devices entirely. Emails she had sent to Chase disappeared from sent folders. Files she had stored on her computer were mysteriously encrypted, replaced by subtle incriminating modifications. Lila's panic grew. She looked to Chase for reassurance. He shrugged, pale-faced, muttering excuses. He, too, began to question his own competence. The couple's carefully choreographed sense of control was collapsing. Aaron did not intervene. He merely watched as the seeds of fear took root in the minds of two people who had once believed themselves untouchable. The true terror arrived when Aaron began to manipulate the home itself. The living room lights dimmed slowly, then brightened abruptly. The thermostat flickered from warm to freezing cold, alternating in an erratic pattern that left them shivering and disoriented. A piano, long neglected in the corner of the house, suddenly played soft, eerie notes Aaron had programmed from an old recording of Lila humming one afternoon. Kekanafta sumper comfort side options. She froze mid-step, staring at the piano as though it had grown teeth. "Aaron?" she whispered, voice trembling. He remained unseen, silent, the calm in the storm. In the master bedroom, a hidden speaker transmitted her own voice, whispering lines she had spoken days ago. By the time he sees it, it will be too late. The words reverberated in the room, fragmented and distorted. Lila clutched her head, her eyes wide with fear. The house was alive, and she knew it. As the night progressed, Aaron escalated the terror with methodical precision. Door handles rattled without touch. Motion sensors triggered lights in empty hallways. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in rooms where neither of them was present. Recorded conversations, snippets of her plotting, of her laughter at his weakness, played back in distorted, haunting tones. Lila's breaths became rapid. Chase tried to calm her, but even he faltered as the house seemed to react to their every move, every word. "What's happening?" Lila whispered, voice shaking. Aaron watched, eyes unblinking, as the couple's panic deepened. They were trapped in the labyrinth of their own deceit, ensnared by the very environment they had assumed they controlled. Aaron had planned every detail. The cameras provided real-time insight into their reactions. The lighting, the audio, the digital manipulations, all synchronized to trigger their deepest fears. Every coincidence was designed, every glitch fabricated, every flicker deliberate. He fed their paranoia slowly, deliberately, like a sculptor chiseling away at marble to reveal the underlying form. He wanted fear to take hold naturally, to grow organically, to twist their minds before the final blow. By the time Lila considered running to a neighbor or calling authorities, Aaron had already isolated her from escape. Phone, laptops, and tablets behaved erratically. Internet access became sporadic. Lights in the exterior rooms flashed in patterns that suggested someone or something was watching them. The house was awake. and it was punishing them. By midnight, Lila was trembling, pacing, whispering frantically to Chase. Her voice cracked, a mixture of fear and disbelief. She had believed herself cunning, untouchable, in control of her marriage, her affair, her life, Kadapikar. Now, the walls themselves seemed to accuse her. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of a light, every whisper of a voice was a reflection of her own guilt. Acade. Aaron observed the crescendo, knowing the psychological trap had been set flawlessly. He had pushed her into the corner she had once tried to force him into, a sense of isolation, confusion, and omnipresent surveillance. In the living room, a projector illuminated the wall with images culled from hidden cameras, clips of Lila with Chase, their plotting, their conspiracies, their indiscretions. Each frame paused long enough to reveal facial expressions she would not want documented, words she never intended to record. She gasped, realizing that nothing was private, nothing was hidden, nothing could save her from the reflection of her own betrayal. Aaron's masterpiece was not in confrontation, not in violence, it was in reflection. The house became a mirror of truth, distorted, haunting, undeniable. Lila's own schemes, her own manipulations, her own crimes, stared back at her in a way that she could not deny. Chase faltered completely. He tried to protest, to rationalize, to explain, but the evidence of their own actions, amplified and manipulated, rendered words meaningless. By the early hours of the morning, Lila was shaking, pale, trembling in the corner of the room, her eyes wide with terror. She had been trapped in the very fear she had tried to inflict on Aaron for months. And Aaron, silent and unseen, allowed the house to deliver the first phase of his revenge, a psychological terror, subtle but absolute, designed to fracture the minds of two people who believed themselves untouchable. The night the house woke up was not one of screams, it was worse. It was the night they realized that every lie, every betrayal, every small act of cruelty had been witnessed, documented, and catalogued. The night the house woke up, Aaron did not need to lift a finger. The walls themselves had become his instrument of revenge, and the storm was far from over. The calm, deliberate patience of Aaron had reached its inevitable conclusion. The house that had watched, recorded, and waited for months now seemed almost sentient, as if it too had been biding its time for the final act. Lila Hart had believed she controlled the narrative of her life, that her web of lies, seduction, and betrayal was flawless. But Aaron's revenge was not hasty. It was precise, surgical, and absolute. By the early morning, while the city slept, he began the methodical release of the evidence, the digital arsenal that would dismantle everything she had built. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, yet with catastrophic effect. Her employer received a meticulously crafted dossier, video recordings of Lila conspiring with her lover, financial manipulations meant to siphon company funds for personal gain, and messages that exposed her duplicity and ill intent. The emails were sent with surgical precision, highlighting facts without embellishment. There were no accusations, no dramatizations, only irrefutable evidence presented in a calm, clinical manner. Recounts. Within hours, HR had opened investigations, colleagues whispered in hallways, their faces a mixture of disbelief and shock. Lila's office, once a sanctuary of influence, became a stage of judgment. Aaron did not stop at professional ruin. Family members received anonymous packets containing photographs, recordings, and snippets of conversations that painted a clear and inescapable picture of Lila's double life. Every smile she had faked, every story she had twisted, every intimate betrayal, laid bare before those she had intended to manipulate and charm. Her parents read messages that she had believed deleted, videos of her plotting her exit, and letters that revealed she had spoken of financial and emotional ruin for Aaron with cold calculation. Their faces, full of shock and disbelief, reflected the depth of her betrayal. In their eyes, the daughter they had loved was gone. In her place stood a stranger, cunning, cruel, and entirely self-serving. Aaron had prepared for the inevitable. Lila's illegal maneuvers were now in the hands of law enforcement. Her plotting to siphon money, her documented adulterous schemes, her calculated attempts at sabotage, all were irrefutable evidence. By midday, an investigator arrived at her home, guided by Aaron's careful documentation. The police were meticulous, following the trail he had left, confirming each claim with precision. Lila's composure cracked as she realized the world was no longer hers to control. Every phone call, every message, every recorded conversation was now a legal weapon. The evidence was overwhelming, and Lila could not argue, could not deny, could not hide. At Chase, the man who had fueled so much of her betrayal, faltered completely. He had believed in their scheme, in the invulnerability of their duplicity, but as Aaron's revelation spreads, mails, messages, videos, and photographs, Chase's wife became aware of the truth. The shock, the betrayal, and the humiliation struck her with a force that left Chase defenseless. He fled, abandoning Lila in the ruins of their carefully constructed illusions. She screamed, she begged, she pleaded, but no ally remained. The man she had counted on for partnership, for escape, for affirmation of her cunning, vanished into the shadows of shame and consequence. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, once unaware, now informed, began to distance themselves. Lila's carefully curated social persona, the charming wife, the competent professional, the affectionate partner, crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth, and every acquaintance she had counted on as a buffer against suspicion now turned away. Invitations disappeared, messages were ignored, and trust evaporated. She had no allies left. Her world had narrowed to the walls of the home she had so meticulously manipulated, the very walls that had been Aaron's allies in documenting her every betrayal. The house had become a mausoleum of secrets. By nightfall, Lila's mental state had deteriorated into chaos. The once calm, calculating woman had become a shadow of fear, remorse, and disbelief. Aaron had not needed to confront her with words, for the evidence itself was a merciless mirror. She wandered from room to room, seeking answers, explanations, or excuses. The walls, the cameras, the lighting, all remnants of Aaron's methodical revenge, reflected a truth she could no longer deny. The psychological torment Aaron had orchestrated over weeks, the manipulations, the subtle sabotage, the paranoia had prepared her for this moment. Now, with the world aware of her betrayal, she was trapped within a collapse of her own making. Aaron finally revealed himself. She turned abruptly, startled. The man who had endured months of deceit, betrayal, and psychological torment stood before her calm, composed, unbroken. I knew everything, Aaron said quietly, voice steady, unwavering. From the first day I watched, I listened, I waited. Every step you took, every lie, every plan, you built your own downfall. Lila's face, once so full of cunning and control, twisted with rage, disbelief, and fear. You. How could you? She stammered. Aaron shook his head. It wasn't me who destroyed you. It was you. Every choice you made, every betrayal, every act of manipulation, it was your own doing. I only gave the house, the world, and the evidence a voice. That's all. She fell to the floor, silent for the first time, realizing the magnitude of her isolation. Chase gone. Family outraged. Colleagues disgusted, legal authorities preparing to act, her reputation obliterated, her schemes, financial, emotional, dismantled piece by piece. Again, Aaron did not gloat, he did not raise his voice. The poetry of his revenge was in the calm, relentless precision with which it had unfolded. Lila had believed she was untouchable. She had believed her mask was flawless. She was wrong. The house that had witnessed years of love, deceit, and betrayal now stood silent. Her rooms that had once been stages for her manipulation became monuments to her undoing. Hidden cameras recorded her final moments of panic, yet no one would see them except Aaron. Drawers that she had rifled through in search of hidden advantages now held nothing but remnants of her own duplicity. The piano that had once played soft, haunting tunes of manipulation now stood silent, a relic of the psychological battlefield she had fought and lost. Aaron walked through the house, touching the walls lightly, feeling the pulse of the structure that had been his ally. He had built nothing out of malice. He had built everything out of observation, patience, and a commitment to justice, his justice. Lila Hart was left with nothing but the house she had used as a stage, nothing but the echoes of her own betrayal, nothing but a collapse of her carefully constructed life. Aaron stood in the foyer, looking back at the woman who had once been his wife. He felt no triumph in the way most men might. There was no celebration, no laughter. There was only the quiet satisfaction of a storm long anticipated, executed with precision, and completed with the inevitability of truth. Lila would face the legal consequences, the social shame, and the financial ruin she had earned. She would face the internal torment of knowing that every act of deceit had been observed, recorded, and catalogued. And Aaron would remain calm and composed, a man who had survived the ultimate betrayal and had allowed the betrayer to construct her own demise. The house, silent now, bore witness a graveyard of secrets, a testament to patience, precision, and the dark, unyielding force of justice. Aaron turned, leaving Lila to the ruins of her life, knowing that sometimes revenge is not in the words, in the confrontation, but in letting the betrayer witness the full scope of the consequences their own choices have wrought. In the end, Lila Hart had been undone by her own hands, and Aaron had ensured the record would be impossible to erase. The storm was over, and the silence that followed was deafening. Months had passed since the collapse of Lila Hart, yet the memory of what had transpired lingered in every corner of the house. Aaron walked through the rooms slowly, deliberately, tracing the edges of walls that had once been silent witnesses to betrayal, deceit, and fear. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paint, a quiet testimony to the effort he had put into reclaiming not just the structure, but the life he had almost lost. He removed the last of the cameras, the final wires hidden behind walls and vents. The control panels that had orchestrated psychological terror now lay dormant, stripped of function. Every trace of the nightmare that had unfolded within these walls was erased, replaced by a serene emptiness that both comforted and unsettled him. The house no longer whispered, no longer flickered, no longer seemed alive, but its memories remained etched in the very grain of its wood. Aaron sat in the living room, the same space where Lila and Chase had panicked under the weight of their own deceit. He let the silence wash over him. There was no victory in the conventional sense, no celebration. What remained was clarity, a truth painstakingly revealed, consequences delivered, and lessons learned. He understood now that the house had never been the instrument of revenge. It had been a mirror, a silent stage reflecting human nature in its rawest form. Lila had acted according to her impulses, her greed, and her self-interest, and Aaron had simply allowed the mirror to do its work. Forgiveness had never been the goal. Understanding had been justice, carefully measured and meticulously executed had been sufficient. Aaron renovated not only the physical space but his own life. Each wall repainted, each room restored, symbolized a reclamation of control. The home no longer bore the scars of deceit, and he no longer bore the weight of unanswered questions. He had rebuilt the life that Lila had threatened to destroy, stronger and steadier than before. Yet, beneath the calm, there was a lingering awareness, a quiet acknowledgement of what trust and betrayal could cost. He had learned to recognize the subtle shadows of deceit, to see the cracks before they became chasms, and to act with the patience that only comes from surviving profound betrayal. Now, the house had one face again. Its walls no longer hid secrets, its corridors no longer carried whispers of manipulation. It was simply a home, a place of life, quiet, and reflection. Aaron walked through it, feeling the weight of solitude but not loneliness. The past had been acknowledged, the lesson delivered, and the danger dissipated. The house, silent and steady, watched over him. And in that silence, Aaron finally understood the cost of misplaced trust, the power of observation, and the quiet satisfaction of truth revealed. Ensa Kamens, ex legend. In the end, clarity had replaced chaos, and the house had returned to its original purpose, shelter, witness, and a reminder that the consequences of betrayal are always real, always lasting, and always inescapable. The shadows were gone, the cameras removed, and the house had one face again. Aaron exhaled, the weight lifting from his chest. The storm had passed, and the calm was absolute. The lesson remained. Trust carefully, observe closely, and never underestimate the quiet patience of the wronged.